Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been long, but the wait is all worth it. This time on the podcast, we have Dinesh Pai. So, Dinesh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Yash. Great to be here and thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, this is a ritual I do on the podcast, okay? So, I never introduce guests because obviously the guests introduce themselves. It's usually better, right? So, yes, who is
Right,
Dinesh
yeah.
Pai? What's happening?
In a nutshell, I'll probably not take a lot of time with the introduction. But so Dinesh works with Zerodha, part of the small team within Zerodha called Rainmatter. At Rainmatter, what we do is we fund startups in the capital market space, trying to deepen the capital market space in India. So anybody working with savings investments are of great interest to Rainmatter and Zerodha because we believe that for a country like India, it's important that we grow the investment base for people to have money in their hands and to prosper. So essentially, that's the goal with Rainmatter, and that's what I do with Zerodha. And I also do a few operational things as part of the founder's office at Zerodha as well.
All right, awesome. So, before we get into the meat of the conversation, how did Zerodha happen? Like, you mentioned, how cold email got you in and, a bunch of stuff. So, I want you to elaborate on that
Right.
process. Like, how was that? Kaise hua?
So as I was talking before, I was in Canada in 2020 when the lockdown happened. And I was very passionate about coming back to India and working for an Indian startup. Right? And whenever you look for any Indian startup or you search for an Indian startup online, I think one of the names that always pops up is Zerodha. But for me, I always knew about Zerodha and Nitin for quite some time. I'd met Nitin in 2015 at one of the small functions that he had attended in Bangalore, which is my hometown back then. And since then, I've been trying to at least pursue an opportunity to work with Zerodha. 2010 happened, and then I'd asked a friend of mine to kind of just introduce me to the team at Zerodha. That happened. We had a few conversations, and over a period of 3 months after that, I think we had series of conversations about am I the right fit? And then I think by November we had finalized things, and I landed up here in January 2021. That's when I joined Zerodha. So cold email plus sequence of conversations and maybe the right aspiration to work for the right startup. But yeah, I mean, it's been a dream come true so far. I think Zerodha is not just a startup and a company. I think the number of smart people I get to work with every day, I think is just amazing. So I get to learn every day, and it's been everything I've wanted to do right after my education in Canada. So it's been amazing so far.
All right. How did that cold email look like? Do you remember?
Oh, so it was just a friend of mine. So I knew a person called Sandeep Shanoy. He had written an email to Nitin saying, please take a look at this profile. He's wanting to come back to India and want to work in India. Only if you see merit, please do give him a shout. Types. And eventually a call happened with Som. I think Som was supposed to be on this podcast with me, but I think he had a few plans and wasn't able to make it. But so I spoke to Som first, and then right after I spoke to him as well. So it was a very simple email with just my resume, and nothing more than that, nothing less than that.
All right. Let's go back to Canada. Okay. So, how was that? What were you studying then? How was the experience studying there?
Right. So I did my MBA in Canada, and I would probably give you cliched MBA answers as well, saying it was all about networking, it was all about um, skills and people and whatnot. But it was a great experience for me personally. I think I went to a place which was weather-wise also not suited for Indians. -30, -25 down the year. Um, Quite a change in terms of where I was geographically, also culture-wise, and great learning in terms of how Canadians function. It gives me perspectives in terms of how different people kind of perceive work. Canada functions very differently in terms of education and work. With education, I didn't really feel a lot of difference. I think it was still the same, just that the delivery of content in the classroom is a little different. But essentially, the quality I think is still the same because I always kept in touch with people in India who were doing their MBAs in ISPs and IIMs and whatnot. And I think we ended up learning the same thing, just that I was in a different atmosphere where I had people from 20, 30 different nationalities in my classroom, and I could interact with them, understand from them what's happening in their countries, and look at certain examples. But apart from that, that experience of being in a new place, independent, away from friends and family, I think kind of makes you stronger because you got to make it by yourself for at least a certain period of time. So it was great. I think, at least for me, I think it was personal development. It was also education for me. So I wanted to learn more, have that master's degree. Just been an ambition since I was, I think, 17 or 18. So I think it was dream come true to go to Canada as well, to be admitted to a university. So I'm the first person in my family to actually go abroad. It also gave me perspective that, maybe younger people in my family probably will see that, that I've done it, so they can do it too. And it's a good opportunity to go out and learn and get that exposure.
What's something that you took back from Canada, like some learning? Like, I know it's a cliche question, but like, what are the differences that you see in between, like, the work culture? Let's say, like, how different is working there and working here? Like, I know you were studying, but I saw you picked up some jobs there at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, no. I did work in Canada right after my MBA for about a year and a half and 2 years. And I think one of the things that I've taken away from Canada is that, people kind of have those boundaries between work and personal life, right? And they're quite strict with it. As in, people end up coming to the office at 6 a.m. and end up leaving office by 4 p.m. And after that, nobody actually ends up working until 6 a.m. the next day. And I think that works there because people are laid back in Canada a little bit. I think the whole economy works like that, and the whole country works like that. And it was refreshing to see a different culture, right? Because in India, um, and I'm talking about these larger companies, people with larger workforce, IT and areas like that, where I think people spend a lot of time work, and there's not really work-life balance. Luckily, at Zerodha, I think, as you know, Nitin's been talking a lot about work-life balance, and we've again put a culture which is very similar to Canada as well, where after 6 p.m. there's no work chats and stuff like that. So I'm lucky that I come back to India, but I'm still working in a company that's probably using the same culture that I saw there and was in awe of. But apart from that, I think just people, right? I mean, how helpful people were in Canada to me, and where I am today wouldn't have been possible without people around me helping me there as well. So Canadians helped me out, Indians helped me out. So it was nice to see that that nationalistic boundaries doesn't really come across when you're in a different country. At least for me, I couldn't see. And that kind of gave me a new perspective as well in terms of how I should probably give it back at some point in time too. So those are two things that strike me when you ask me what did I take away from Canada.
Interesting. All right. So it's like I've been in the Jordan Peterson phase, like probably like a year back. And
Right, yeah.
he's been messing around with the Canadian government for a long time. Right? So I actually have like a very genuine question: is it so bad there, or is it like just some like really smart person just nitpicking on what's going wrong in the government? Like, what's the case?
Right. So if you ever travel to Canada, right, I don't think you'll ever end up meeting people who'll talk politics with you. I think
Also,
this whole buzz around Jordan Peterson, I think, is more around social media, right? Because he's on social media, he's got so many followers, there's so much content out there. I think we end up coming across it. But I think if you're in Canada, if you're working in a place, you're studying with somebody at a university, I don't think you'll ever end up discussing politics for more than, say, 1 to 2% of your entire time there. And I think that's because people kind of prioritize a lot of other things in life. Politics for them is a once in a 4-year, 3-year kind of event where they kind of have healthy debates. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but Canadians are very friendly people, and I know the people from the States kind of don't like it, or at least have satires around how friendly Canadians are, but they're actually genuinely nice people, and they're nice to everybody, not just Canadians. And even political debates there, if you look at Parliament of Canada, they're so civil, and they're very, very eloquent, right? I mean, you can listen to what everybody's saying, and I think that kind of translates to the entire community and the diaspora there as well. So Jordan Peterson saying something, I think somebody is disagreeing with him, I think both voices will be heard. And I think that's something that's very nice. But again, situation when I left Canada in 2020 was very different to what it is today. I think some of the news and some of the things coming out of Canada right now, I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm not really an expert at that as well. So, but again, dude, I mean, this is a problem, I think, with every country, not just Canada. But yeah, I think it's not as bad as how we perceive it to be, always, anyway.
That's great. All right, like the next question is like it's almost like a cliche thing that's happening around, at least in the social media space right now, right? So people are constantly shitting on the idea of going out and studying and wasting, I mean, not even wasting, like using up so much capital or having like student loan on your back before you start the career. What do you think about that? Do you think studying abroad is worth it?
That's a tricky question, right? Again, it depends, and the context and everything to do with that person who's wanting to go abroad, right? So, I've seen friends and people in my network who've gone out and studied because somebody else has told them that it's best for them. They've never done research. They've never looked at universities. They've never looked at professors they'd like to probably talk to, interact with. They've never looked at subjects that they probably want to learn as well. But just because somebody else has done it, they'd like to go. I think that's the wrong approach. I think it can be good and bad, but I think the right way to approach higher education is to know what you are getting into. I think you have to make peace with a lot of things. I think you'll be staying away from family, away from your country, away from your friends. Probably not meet a lot of your close friends and meet a lot of or miss a lot of events in the process. But I think if you're made up your mind in terms of what to study and what you have to pursue, then I think uh, that's a good decision making step. But is it good or bad? Is it right or wrong? I don't think that's the right way to ask that question. I think the question should be, what should people be doing before they go outside and study that? And they should speaking to alumni of that university, speaking to professors there, speaking to admission council there, speaking to a lot of people, trying to make sure that they have got every bit of information they possibly can get even before making that decision. And if that fits into your longer term plans, what you want to do in life, I think then it's great. For me, I wanted to do MBA because I'm an engineer. I'm a computer science engineer, and I wanted to get into finance. It's something that was very exciting for me, and capital markets was something that I was very crazy about. Being in Canada, I could never trade in Indian markets because education, always working, so I never took out time. But I think MBA kind of gave me that exposure to finance and gave me this opportunity. So, but yeah, I think it depends on person to person. If you're ready to make some sacrifices and know what you want to get in life, I think higher education can be great. And I mean, there are examples out there, right? And my friends who are working in the states, I think they're all doing really well. I think all of them made that conscious decision of chasing something in life, and I think they've done well. So if people want to go outside, I think they should follow that decision making process.
Interesting. What jobs did you pick up while you were in Canada?
So when I was studying, a lot of jobs. I think a lot of part-time jobs, a lot of jobs on the campus as well, because I think I ended up meeting a lot of professors. So I ended up getting these teaching assistant kind of roles, which kind of paid the bills, and also did a few jobs outside too. But right after I joined ENY in Canada, so I think once I got a full-time job, I never really got any part-time jobs. But I think all jobs are very treated very fairly in Canada. I don't think people never really look down upon any kind of job to do. So that is kind of also very nice. And maybe I should have mentioned that when you asked me what I took away from Canada. I think one of the differences between India and Canada is also that, right? I think India, people doing jobs which are not in software, not in IT, not fancy, I think gets looked down upon. Doesn't really happen in Canada. So did a bunch of jobs, but mainly on campus. Did some research jobs, did some teaching assistant jobs, quite fun, invigilating exams and stuff like that. But nothing out of the ordinary.
Interesting. How are your 4 years of engineering?
Brings back a lot of memories. I was just talking to a friend the other day about how quickly it's gone, right? I mean, it's 2022 now, and can't believe engineering was about 8 years ago, or at least 2014 was 8 years ago. I made a lot of friends. I'm from Southern India, by the way, so I had zero North Indian friends. And my first year in engineering, I was in a hostel room with friend from Rajasthan and a friend from Mumbai, and got to learn so much about how they look at life, right? And I never looked back from there. I think they were my best friends. I met so many other people who in the classroom from different states, and I think engineering was all about meeting people from different states for me. So luckily that happened in Bangalore. I didn't have to travel anywhere else, and I enjoyed a lot of it. I come from a very small village in Udupi, and for me to go to Bangalore to do engineering was all fancy. And yeah, it was pretty cool because I enjoyed all of it. I wanted to learn, spent a lot of time studying, and also worked very hard, and had fun on the side, and met good people. And I think that's all I could have asked for at that point in time. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Interesting. All right, man. Like this question, like this comes from. See, I'm not sure if you know about Warren Meyer. Do you?
I've spoken to Varun Maya only recently. I think they're
Okay.
running the Avalon scenes, right? Basically.
Yeah, yeah. So got him on the
Yeah.
podcast like a year back or so. So what
Okay.
he mentioned, like recently he mentioned, like in another podcast he did, that South Indians are usually like kind of underconfident. Like that's what he said because
Right.
he is a South Indian, right? Like, and when they interact
Okay.
with North Indians, it's not easy. Like, is that what happened with your case when you interacted with North Indians and like the
Mm,
cross culture thing happened and you know,
I don't
you,
think so. I mean, if for anything, I think South Indian. I don't see any difference as such, right? I mean,
yeah.
at least from my personal opinion, from my perspective, from or at least with my cohort in engineering, I think
Hmm.
all of us kind of mingled. I don't think there was ever that friction. I haven't really noticed anything like that. But sure, if there's an unpopular opinion out there, I think that is that probably South Indians and North Indian students in a university probably don't mix up, and I don't think I agree with that, because some of the best people I met were from both sides of the story, and at least some of the people who took care of me were also North Indians and South Indians. So I would say I don't probably relate to that, but what I can say is I think doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, I think once you know somebody, once you have that person connect, it doesn't really matter where they are from, and at least that's what I figured out. That initially, when we get into this whole college and new ecosystem, new environment, I think everybody gets a little defensive, and I think that's the reason for that perspective. But I think once 6 months, 7 months down the line, I think everybody starts talking to everybody. I don't think that's a problem at all. So I haven't seen that problem personally.
Interesting. All right, let's get back to Zerodha. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is like a ritual I do on the podcast. This is the second ritual. So the first, the ritual is like I asked the person on the podcast like how would you explain the Zerodha business model to an 8-year-old? Let's say an 8-year-old just comes up to you and asks, "Hey Dinesh, what do you do?" So what would you say?
Right. Right. So simplification is probably not my strong suit, but I'll give this a shot. So, there are companies out there who are operating. Eventually, these companies to operate, they need money. They raise money through various ways. They have investors. Eventually, they try to get money from the public as well by going public. Now, what do you mean by going public? Is that they hand people ownership of the companies in return for, say, shares of the companies. That's what people buy in equities. Now, that's basically the equity delivery trade, is what we call it, Zerodha. For our business model as such, we don't charge anything for equity delivery, so we keep that relatively simple. Now, what happened over a period of time is that there were people who wanted to, speculate on some of these stocks and speculate on some of the indices. Now, an index or an index is basically set of stocks that is weighted by the market caps, and it's part of the, or at least it index shows what's happening with underlying stocks of companies. Now, people who wanted to speculate, wanted to have some amount of fanciness to investment. They came up with a concept of leverage, basically um, reducing the upfront money to making sure that you get bigger exposure in terms of the investment that you can profit from. So essentially, that's the business model of Zerodha, is that we let people do equity trades and say futures and options or derivatives. Again, apart from currency, commodities, and stuff like that. But that's essentially what our business is. Now, the business model is more around transparency, right? I think before Zerodha, there were stockbrokers, of course. Now, why is Zerodha successful? I think that's because of how transparent we are with charging, how transparent we are with pricing, how our charges are also 20 rupees per trade. When I say trade, I mean derivatives. So basically, 90% of the exchange turnover is derivatives. 9% is intraday stocks that people buy and sell, and 1% is equity delivery. So whenever you buy a share for into a demat account and that you want to sell maybe 3-4 days later, that's a very tiny fraction of what happens on the exchange. So all the derivatives and all the speculation is what we earn money from. And the business model is just doing well for the customer, right, and helping them manage money better. I think I would say that is the business model. Is that for all of us at Zerodha, when we're working, I think there's only one thing that we look for, is to help our customers do better. That's because it's not always about revenue, right? For us, at least, we look at how can we stop people from trading in penny stocks. We look at how can we stop people from trading altogether if they're losing. So we've got nudges, we've got kill switch, we've got so many other features. We've got trading journal as well where people can learn from their mistakes. So everything we've done with our application, everything we've done with our products, I think it is about helping the customers and deepening the capital market space in India. And I think I would say that would be the business model of Zerodha, is that we're trying to help people manage money.
Interesting. All right. So I'll be honest. I didn't understand like a few parts of it. But
Okay.
like,
So, as I said, like, I
yeah,
mean, to put it in a few sentences, I think it's quite difficult for me. Again, simplification is not my strong suit. Sorry.
for sure. That's all right. Okay. Let's jump back to like the work culture in Zerodha, right? So how's it working
Right.
in Zerodha? Like, what's different?
So right off the bat, it's a very flat organization. There are no hierarchies. It's absolutely wonderful to work with smart people. I think um, I learn something new every day. And as cliche as it might sound, I think there's a saying which says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And I certainly don't feel I'm in the wrong room because there's always somebody who's smarter than me in the room. So I think the work culture is just that, right? I mean, people are very nice to each other, very kind. And I think there's always something new to learn. Um, but apart from that, I think it's a very open organization. We respect people. We try to give people that space, that work-life balance, and everything that they desire, basically. So, and Nitin's kind of been very generous with ESOPs and stuff like that. So it's not always about soft skills. I think monetary-wise as well. I think people have done really well. That's because of the ideology of the leaders within the company is to help employees also to grow and develop over a period of time. So it's not always about what's the productivity and stuff like that. It's also about personal growth, how you're taking care of your health. I think a lot of health initiatives too. At least I, in my experience, having worked at 3 different or 4 different companies, haven't seen the kind of extensive steps and projects we take up to just take care of our employees, right? So, which is super nice, and I think that's different as compared to any other company. So, at least those are some of the things that come to mind.
Interesting. I had a couple of questions about the company having like a flat hierarchy structure, like no hierarchies
Right,
at all. How does that
right.
how does that work, right? So because most of the people I've talked to who have been in startups, they have sort of emphasized on the fact that there should be some sort of a hierarchy, some sort of leader. And I think
Correct.
even I heard that on Peterson as well a couple of months ago.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
how well has that worked for you guys, like having a flat structure?
Right. I think that whole concept of having a leader, I think that really applies to, right? I mean, we've got leaders too. I mean, there's Nitin, there's Kailash, who's our CTO, there's Venu, who's our COO, there's Hanan, who's head of customer support. And I think, all of these people kind of give us direction. So when I say flat hierarchy, I think what I mean to say is I think within our peers, I think there's not really any kind of separation in terms of designation. I think, we all have different designations, but I don't think anybody has ever looked at their designation. So that's because we all collaboratively work. I think we listen to each other and we kind of accept ideas from each other. There's nobody who says, they know everything. I think that's one of the differences. But as you said, I think one of the points that you just mentioned is that there needs to be some amount of direction, right? And I think we do have that direction. The direction, as I said, is to help people manage money better and do everything possible to help the clients. And for us, I think that itself is the underlying vision of the company, is to help people in whatever way possible, at least all of our clients. And that's what we try to do day in and day out with anything we do. And anytime we try to take up a new project, we try to answer the questions, how does this help our clients? And I'm sure, if there are no reasons why it wouldn't help our clients, we don't really give it priority. But um, again, not saying there are not situations where we need a leader to make a decision, because there's always times when a decision needs to be made. But those times are very far and few. But essentially, there are a few leaders who set a vision, and what it also does, it frees up space for everybody else to work. Right? I think people work differently, and to get all of them to work in the same structure that corporates work, I think it doesn't really work out. As we scale, as we grow, I think it might change, but for now, or at least companies might change as they grow, or startups might change. But for us, it's worked really well, and I think we are 1,100 people. It's a fairly large company. I've seen companies with 500 people having hierarchies, right? So we're 1,100 people, so it's worked for us, and I'm sure it's going to work in the future because we've got an underlying vision. We know exactly what the leaders expect. We know exactly what our clients expect of us, and I think that is the utmost priority. And I think that kind of helps set the vision or the direction for everything we do.
What do you think like makes for a good leader in the corporate space?
Empathy. I think, after having spent a lot of time before Zerodha in corporates, I think that is very important. Not saying other things are say less important, but I think empathy in this current environment is very important. When I say empathy, I mean to say um, being fair with people, right? I mean, understanding the situation, understanding the context. I think this emotional intelligence is quite easy to narrate and to talk about, but I think in practice it's quite difficult and it takes a lot of work because everybody is human, right? I mean, everybody can get angry, everybody can get a little flustered, and I think a manager needs to know how to be calm, how to motivate their employees, and I think that will only come from empathy. And I've seen that in Zerodha. I think all of our leaders are quite amazing how they handle people problems, and none of them have any kind of corporate experience, right? And I think they do it well because they do it genuinely, and I think that forced taking care of employees doesn't really work out well. As a manager, I think you really need to dedicate time and effort and give energy to what you're doing and help people develop. If you're not, if or say if your reports are not growing, if the reports don't feel that they're learning something new, I don't think they'll be following you for quite some time. So I would say empathy and just being very considerate about the situation, I think is very important. Technical skills and stuff like that, I think will always be there. But yeah, I think those interpersonal and emotional intelligence kind of goes a long way.
Interesting. Like, what's like the trickiest situation that you have handled in like, let's say Zerodha? Like, can you narrate an instance?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
What's the trickiest situation that you have
Trickiest.
handled? Like, in
Ah,
terms of like with people, like with like sort of leading people.
Interesting. You know, can we come back to this later? I can't think of any as of now. But to be honest, there's not been any. I don't
Acha.
think there's ever a situation where I felt it's been tricky. Right? I think this is what I was getting at earlier. Is that I think as an organization we're very upfront. As in, there's only honest conversations going on. There's never really that you know corporate culture where people are hiding things and stuff like that. I think we're all very fearless in terms of what we can say to each other, and often we do say things if at all there's an issue. But there's never been any tricky situations, at least for me, and I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard from anybody as well. So, but there's been tons outside in my friend circles that I've heard of, but none that comes to mind when I think of Zero.
So like, what do you keep in mind to like even to avoid those situations? Like, how is like the track record so clean? Like, look, there has to be something that you always keep in mind, right? While probably talking to
Right.
juniors or like whatever, like something like
Uh,
that.
Correct. I think it's again driven from the leadership, right? I think what happens is that, see, people I report to kind of speak to me however or whichever way. I think I would speak to people in the same way, right? Because I think
Hmm.
that's what I learn, and I think that is kind of driven into us at Zero. It's that you always have to be considerate of somebody else, and work is fine and cool and all that, but I think for me, at least personally, I look at everybody as an equal, right? I mean, at Zerodha, at least everybody, we're a flat organization, as I said. I think everybody's ideas are respected and taken, and it's actually implemented. And in fact, there have been a lot of ideas from a lot of people who probably aren't working directly with it, right? And I think that happens because as an organization, we truly believe that we're a flat organization, and it wouldn't have happened anywhere else because there's so many levels of people you'll have to go through for an idea to come up and bubble up to with it. Right? I think internally we have a forum where people can express ideas any point in time, and that kind of gives an option for everybody to probably express themselves. And what that does is everybody is obviously honest with each other. I think nobody's hiding any kind of information because there's no incentive to do that, and I think that kind of helps. And what do I keep in mind when I interact with people is to just be respectful, right? I think that kind of ends the story. I think it's a full stop for me. I think if you're respectful with somebody, you're talking in a certain way, and I don't think anything you say can make it worse, right? I think that respect between you and somebody else should be there even if somebody is not part of Zerodha. I think that's a general life perspective for me as well. So yeah, I think just being respectful is kind of quite important, and everybody is, right. I think with me, it's not just me. I think everybody around me is quite respectful with what they do and with how they interact with people. So it becomes easier because it's not just you who's trying to do things. I think you see other people putting in effort too. So I think it's quite nice that way, and that's the only reason why we've been, or at least we've done what we've done. So
Interesting. What's like the proper way to sort of reject an idea? Let's say a colleague of yours, or probably like a junior of yours,
right,
just comes in and gives you
right,
an idea, and you're the one to take charge of it. Like,
right.
what's the proper way to reject it?
So, for me, at least personally, I would look at all the data that's available, right? When I say data, I mean to say what is the idea that's come, what is the impact of it, how many people will it benefit, and I think just based on that, it's never going to be me rejecting that idea, right? I think it'll just be a conversation between me and that person where we'll sit down and we'll look at things about what's this going to do, what's the good and the bad, how long will this take to build, and is this actually worth working on, and are there other things that we'd rather spend our time on? And if we both agree on something, I think we end up not doing that. But if we both disagree, then we bring in another person, we kind of show it, we talk to other people, crowdsource, and then try to reach a decision. But it's never just one person trying to say no. It's always collaborative, it's always consensus, right? And when I say consensus, I don't mean agreement. I mean, I can bring an idea to somebody who can say no, but I can disagree with that decision, but I should be on board with that no, right? So I think that's driven into us, is that no doesn't mean that the idea was bad. It's just means that at this point in time, it's probably not worth it working on this, because we'd rather spend time on something else. So I think that would be a better conversation, and shelve the idea rather than reject it. I think that's also something that we do. But essentially, I mean, again, this is not really a problem within Zerodha, because, as I said, we are very objective with people, and there's never really any kind of hierarchy in there that kind of puts barriers in between communication between people and leaders or making decisions. So that kind of helps, because you can take your idea to Nathan directly as well. So somebody bringing an idea to me, bringing an idea to Nathan, I think it's the same process. I think we all discuss it. We all see what's the merit and the cons, and I think that itself will give us the decision. So it's never somebody else just sitting and making the decision.
That's interesting. Like, have you ever do you actively sit in sit in hiring interviews? Like, is that have you done that
Um,
ever?
yeah. We've done a few interviews. Again, since we're a very small team, I don't think we actively hire people, right? I
Acha.
mean, we've been trying to hire a few business analysts for some time now, and we recently concluded our hiring process as well. So, yeah, I mean, we do a few interviews, but
That's
again,
great. So,
yeah,
what did
it's
that
never.
teach you? Like, what did that teach you? Like, hiring people. Like, what's your? Do you have like a checklist? If these boxes check, then we'll get this guy in.
Uh, not really. I think for me at least personally, I'd like to know what the person is like. I mean, um, just the thought process, just the culture and the fit to Zerodha. I think we as a company, we're very open-minded, we're very collaborative, and everybody's expected to communicate well with each other. And I think those are some of the boxes that we'd like to see in somebody. I think when somebody comes to us, I think, or is in an interview, we'd like to see that personal side of that person. Technical side of it, obviously, yes, since we're in capital markets, we look at some of those other things, but I'm not going to get into that.
Interesting.
But just the boxes in terms of personal skills, I think just the regular, genuine person who's ready to, work on things, ready to probably collaborate and communicate well, and is excited to be a part of Zerodha, right? I think that's very important too. And one of the reasons why, or at least I feel somebody would not be a good fit is if you're chasing other objectives, right? I think people who come to Zerodha to work for Zerodha and the idea behind helping people, I think that's obviously a great fit. Apart from that, I don't think there's a lot of checklists out there. We just look at how good people are, and how genuine they are and what they want to do in life. And that kind of is our direction and the North Star.
Like, what are the problems that you guys are facing while hiring people? Like, you recently hired a couple, right? So from
Right.
what I've talked to a couple of guys in Bangalore who own startups, they said that they are seeing too many job hoppers, like at least in Bangalore, like too many of them,
Right.
just changing jobs every
Correct.
3 months, 4 months. So is that the same
Correct.
with Zerodha? Like, what was the case?
Not really. I think this whole job hopping kind of trend, right? I think it's mostly in tech, and within Zerodha, I think a technology team is 31 people, and
Acha.
Kailash, our CTO, is very particular about how to hire and how many people to hire. And I think Nitin's kind of spoken about this at length as well in various webinars and podcasts, and I think that's why that whole job hopping is kind of not an issue for us. And it's true in Bangalore, like, I mean, people do have multiple offers, and I think that kind of happens, but we've not really seen that at Zerodha. And for the hiring part as well, I mean, there are always issues here and there, but nothing really that we can highlight. Excel. I think it's just common problems of finding the right talent. It just takes time sometimes, and that's the only thing that probably comes to mind.
Interesting. All right, let's come back to stock markets. Okay, so like just a
Yeah,
disclaimer, I'm like a complete noob about stock markets. I don't know most of the fundamentals, but
right,
what I've seen right now, it's booming a lot, at least in the social media space, and probably like people who are like 3-4 years elder to me, they're getting into it
right,
like quickly.
right.
So I have a couple of questions on that. So first question is like, what makes the idea of the stock market so attractive to first jobbers or like second jobbers?
Mm, I think it's just their friends hyping it up, right? I think um, there's nothing out there that makes it really attractive. I think it's just these social media posts. It's just the buzz around the whole wealth generation or how quickly you can generate wealth. I think that kind of lures people in. But apart from that, I don't see why it should be very attractive, right? I mean, we've recently released a post which talks about how only a tiny fraction of people who are investing in the markets actually or trading the markets actually make money. And this gets missed in all the noise because of all the content out there, all the successful people we hear from. Now, people who we don't hear from on social media are all the people who lost money in the stock markets. I think that's one of the reasons why it becomes very attractive for first jobbers and second jobbers. But I can't think of any other reason at this point in time.
Interesting. Like, to what degree do you think like the success in stock market is like overrated? Let's say on social media or like whatever, like traditional media. Because like we
F-
always hear about people, like whatever stories about
yeah,
people like making like insane amount of money just like putting in
correct,
small amounts. Like, what do you think about that?
correct,
Like, how
correct.
overrated is that?
I think there's a lot of effort that goes behind it, and I think there's a lot of say learning that goes behind it. Overrated, I wouldn't say so. What I would say is I think there's a lot of factors at play. I think you've got to know what you're trying to do and also have a lot of risk management things in your mind. I think you got to learn all these things over a period of time to actually have that say outcome, right? Because I think what we do see on social media with stock markets is that somebody's saying they put 20 lakhs and they've gotten 3 crores at the end of it. Now that journey from 20 lakhs to 3 crores, I think would have been different for different people, and I think to know that and to understand that is quite important. But apart from that, I think success in stock markets is valid. I think a lot of people have done well, but there are several more people. I mean, multiples of the people who've done well who have not done well in the stock markets, who we don't hear from because obviously negative stories never really come out. So I would say it's a lot of learning, it's a lot of effort, and if somebody is willing to do and go that far, I think it's absolutely not bad. But again, I think it's a very risky space to be in. I think we've kind of alluded to it multiple times and kind of keep talking about it. Is that a very tiny fraction of people who are trading or investing in the markets kind of make money, and it's just historical trends, right? So for us, I think that's very important that we communicate to people that there is risks in the market here, and I think that is also out there now. But over the past couple of years, I think it's just become a buzzword because of how much money has been floating around and how much people have been investing. Since there's a lot of money in the market, the number of goods or the stocks that you can purchase remain same. I think asset prices have inflated quite a while. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been one of the reasons why there's been a lot of talk around it. But apart from that, it's a very risky space to be.
For sure. How big of an impact has internet had on like the stock market space? Like, let's say earlier, a couple of years ago, where internet wasn't such a big thing, at least in India.
Right.
How,
Right.
like, what are the differences? How differently did people trade? Like were the de- like the do the decisions of people change because of the internet?
I wouldn't say decisions of people have changed, but I think people have become self-sufficient, right? So, one of the reasons why Zerodha has, grown from say 1 or 2 million customers to about 8 million today is also because of Aadhaar. Now, Aadhaar is just an online identification, and that has kind of helped us onboard people without paperwork. And internet kind of has enabled that indirectly. I think that's been one of the important points. It's not about decision making; it's all the finer friction points, right? That internet has disabled now, or at least removed. Payments, for example, identification, paperwork, signatures, whatnot. You name some of these smaller friction points. If they are removed by the internet, I think kind of helps the business and the function that is enabling a lot of things for people. In the capital market space, yeah, I've seen a lot of people in my family kind of trade before, without discount brokers, without applications, without web interfaces, etc. Is that they'll call their brokers and probably place trades, etc. Now it's very different because you get access to a lot of things at the tip of your, or at least at your fingertips, and that kind of helps a lot because you're in control of the decisions you can take. You're not really reliant upon somebody else picking up the phone and exiting your trade or entering your trade or whatnot. So that kind of helps. But I think the idea behind internet enabling stock markets should be looked at from a perspective of removing smaller friction points like onboarding, payments, demat, and whatnot. So I think those smaller problems, once were removed, I think has helped the Indian capital market space grow. It's never really been about that. The other larger factors, I think it's always been smaller things.
Interesting. So, like, why was there like an influx of people investing in influx of like retail investors after the lockdown, or let's say during the lockdown?
Right. So, I've met a lot of people in the past year who've said, I started investing last year. And my next question is always to them, why? Why did you invest? And the answer's always been, I was doing nothing. I was at home. I had time. So everybody was talking about the stock markets and I kind of invested. And I think that is the answer, hopefully. And I'll keep talking to people and I'll probably let you know if the answer changes. But at this point in time, the answer is that people really found it interesting to learn something new, to invest. Everybody else around them was doing, and it just became a trend, right? I think three of your friends started doing it. People looked at them and said, why shouldn't we do it? And they did it, and people at home, they did it. And I think it just became one of those network effect thing. Again, no real right answers here. It's just people having a lot of time at their hands who ended up looking at different things, and naturally they would pivot towards somewhere where there is monetary gain out of it, and that's the stock market. So I think that's why people kind of invested over the last couple of years.
So, like, how does that change the industry, right? So, I think this was the first time where like a typical trend type situation happened where people started entering the stock market space because probably the entry barrier is easier, no, because of the internet, as you said. Like, how does that change the
Correct.
industry?
That's an interesting question. So, I haven't personally really looked at the kind of influx of say clients in the Indian capital market space. I think one of the things that I kind of closely tracked was the 2008 crash. That's only after I got a job in 2014, which was in the financial services space, is when I tried to look at it. And there was an exodus of clients then, right? And 2008 crash kind of impacted India. A lot of people stopped trading, and for the numbers to go up to the level of say 2007 or 2008 mid, just before the crash, it took another decade to reach that number. And that kind of talks about how volatile this market is, right? I think people do come in quickly. Now if there's a drawdown or if there's a bear market that kind of pushes the stock market down, then I think people will leave as quickly as well. So,
Hmm.
in terms of what changed the industry, I think we'll only see over a period of time. I think we'll need at least couple of years more to see how this has actually impacted the industry. But at this point in time, I think it's great that people have entered the stock markets. They have demat accounts. They're trying to invest in mutual funds, and they're trying to at least look at some of the things that they can invest in. And I think this education can go a long way because the inflation, a lot of other things. I think money in the bank is losing its value over a period of time. Not saying somebody should come and trade and invest if they have money in the banks, but I'm saying people who are looking at stock markets, I'm sure they're probably learning as well, which is probably a good thing because that kind of helps grow the market over a period of time. But the number is not the only thing to look at. I think the influx is true, but I think if the market becomes volatile, these people will leave as quickly as well. I think the number of serious traders in the market has only probably gone up a tiny fraction. But I think the retail traders who have entered only after 2020 is a large portion of that new addition to the markets, which again we'll see how it plays out over the next 4 to 5 years.
Interesting, right? So, like, what is that one thing that drives the stock market for the most part? Like, on what basis does an average Indian make a buy or sell decision? Let's talk about like the time period of let's say the past 4 years. Okay, like, are there
Right.
like WhatsApp groups, like, do like social media gurus sort of
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm sure.
do
I'm
their
sure
thing?
there are, right? I mean, yeah, yeah, no, I'm sure there are like a lot of communities. But I think the answer to what you asked me is just one word, right? I think that's just greed and wanting to make money out of the stocks and investments. I think that kind of drives all the decision making itself. And there's always fear and greed in the markets. And I think Ray Dalio kind of puts it very nice that a bull market, bear market is just switching between greed and fear, right? So I think it's just those two concepts. And humans, with our behavior, I think we're very basic. As much as we'd like to think that we're very complex animals, I think we're very basic in terms of how we think. And I think fear and greed is all there is. And every time you try to invest in something, it's you're hoping to make money out of it, which is greed. And if you're trying to exit something, I think that's because you're fearing that you'll probably lose money. And that's all there is to it. And I think there are a lot of communities, a lot of say WhatsApp groups, etc., that you just mentioned that are built around it. I haven't personally looked at a lot of it, but I'm sure there are a lot of them, and I'm not sure what happens out there. But maybe I should definitely do check out. But yeah, I think that's my answer. Is that I think Nitin also kind of has spoken about it. It's just fear and greed.
Right. So, like, I think Nitin tweeted about how influencers on Twitter are like just not. I think tweeted about Elon Musk. If I'm not wrong, I might be wrong. I'm not sure about how
Okay,
hyping up, let's say, any like very volatile asset is
right.
wrong. What do you think
Yeah, yeah.
about that?
So,
Like, at least on Twitter.
yeah, I don't, I'm not sure if Nitin's tweeted that, but so I'll go back and check anyway. But the thing is, I think what's happened over a period of time over the last year is that with these cryptocurrencies and NFTs and stuff like that, I think it's okay as long as an asset is holding its value, right? So what happens is that somebody is trying to push people to purchase an asset, and that asset eventually becomes worthless. The people who end up holding the bag full of worthless stuff is just the retail traders, right? Because they've gotten in at the wrong time and they've gotten influenced by people because they have no idea what's happening, and they've just gone by a tweet or a LinkedIn post or a message that they've gotten or a friend who's tipped them, and whatever it is, I think eventually the idea is to make sure that people who are probably not having access to information are not affected. And in this case, with Twitter, with social media, I think it's very easy to manipulate people. That's what's happened over a period of time last year. We've seen a lot of those cryptocurrencies kind of pump up in value, and then eventually over the next couple of hours goes to zero. A lot of people have lost out money like that. So I think that's quite wrong. I think because people who lose out money are probably not wealthy, right? I mean, they're making mistakes that are sometimes very bad for their financial health, etc. So it is kind of wrong what's happening in the cryptocurrency space with that pump and dump kind of scheme. But yeah, nothing more to add to that apart from the fact that for us at least with Indian regulatory space, it's very hard to do things like this. I think there's a lot of regulations and there's a lot of say oversight from SEBI, etc. And I think that kind of helps protect the retail investors in India, which is the difference between India and the US, right? Because the US is quite liberal in terms of capital markets, and a lot of things which are very grey kind of happens very openly in the US. And in India, it's still a very investor friendly market because there's still regulators trying to take care of you. But yeah, I think that's my answer to that question.
Interesting. Like, what is like the right way to look at losing money in the markets? Let's say I lose like X amount of money tomorrow. What is the right way to look at it?
So I would say, at least from my okay, so this is my personal opinion and at least how I look at things is that if you are looking to take risks in the markets, I think it should be a fraction of your net worth, right? So whatever or at least the money that you're willing to lose. And one of the things that Nitin kind of always tells on webinars, on podcasts, and internally as well, is to always make peace with the worst outcome, right? So if you're investing in the markets, if you're taking a sum of money, can be 100 rupees, can be 1000 rupees, can be 10,000 rupees. And if you can see that money go away and it wouldn't really impact your life in a very drastic way, I think that is then still a very calculative, risky decision. Now, if you're putting in money that you know is probably meant for something else and it's probably useful for something else that is more important than investing and stuff like that, I think then it's the wrong way to go about it. I think the idea is to understand where the risk limit is and invest accordingly. At least that's my personal opinion and how I look at things. Is that you got to understand what's your risk parameter, and then look at that risk and see how much can I invest, and then make peace with the worst outcome, and then I think you're good to go. Because then the upsides, nobody has to teach you how to deal with that. But at least the downside of it, it won't really impact you because you've already thought about it, you're already prepared for it.
Interesting. Like what's the way to create luck in the stock market space? Like, is there a
Uh,
way to do it like how we do it in, probably like do it in life, like how we sort of keep our eggs in multiple baskets? So if,
Right,
let's say, when
right.
one
No,
basket falls.
diversify. Absolutely. No, no, diversify. I think that's one way about it. But I think the question you asked me was how do you get lucky with the markets, right? I don't think there's a silver bullet there. I don't think
Yeah.
there's any answer to that question. Absolutely not. Unless you somehow can get hold of information that nobody else has. I don't think it's possible. And I recently read a Reddit thread on this, and I'll probably share it with you after this call about how this one person is ranting about how everything is priced in, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
when you look at a stock and you're thinking, maybe the next quarter sales are not priced in, I think you're wrong, because it's already priced in by investors who are ahead of you, are like actually doing this day in and day out. It kind of made sense to me. And I think the stock markets and investing, at least in equities and say futures and options and derivatives, is all about knowing um, information. And I think that itself is the answer. There is that if you have information, somehow get hold of information, you can get lucky. But if you can't, then diversification is one way to mitigate risk. I think diversification is not the way to get lucky. I think it's just protects you on the downside, where if one basket falls, I think you still have nine standing. So that
Mm-hmm.
way, at least some of your capital is preserved rather than growing. But yeah, I think that preservation goes a long way too.
Also, like, what are a few shortcomings in the Indian stock market space setup? Like
Um, I would say, you
what's
know,
going wrong?
yeah, what's going wrong? That's a good question. I haven't really given a thought to it, but maybe in the fintech space, I think there can be more that should be allowed and experimented on, because with technology, with some of these other things that's upcoming, I think we, as at least as India, should be open to innovating and open to trying a few things, and that's been happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, over the past year or so, I think there have been sandboxes, innovation sandbox, etc., regulatory sandboxes. It's been happening now, but what was going wrong was that will to at least experiment on some of these things. So now that it's happening, I don't really have any complaints. I think, at least as I said, India is very investor friendly. We are a very regulated market, and that kind of helps. As much as we'd like to, or at least some people would like to say complain about it, I think it helps protect retail investors in India, which is a good thing in the long run. So no real complaints as such, and I'll probably think about it a little bit and let you know in case I find something.
What do you think about DeFi?
Oh, decentralized finance. So, it's a fancy way of putting what an LLC is. So
Huh?
LLC is basically a very legal structure of forming a company of sorts. And,
Mm-hmm.
DeFi is a fancy new term, right? People are throwing it around. Now, we've been speaking about it internally and discussing and debating about how DeFi works. And for us, at least from my personal opinion, there's a lot of things, or at least a solution in looking for a problem, right? Eventually, what can happen right now with the DeFi can happen in a legal construct as well. But there have been a lot of blogs around this, a lot of webinars, a lot of podcasts around how DeFi is the answer to a lot of problems we've been facing. But we'll only see over a period of time how this plays out. I think at least from my perspective, it's just a company structure that is run on a blockchain, and there are smart contracts for decision making. So, how is that different from current structures? Is that it takes away the decision making power from a certain set of people and gives it to a larger set of people. Does that really work in all circumstances? How can that be enforced? What will be the interface be for the physical medium? If things go wrong, who's going to take care of it? What happens when certain, say, a large section of the people who have power there are are trying to lobby against the rest of the people? So some of those problems, will always remain, and I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But at least from my perspective, it's just a fancy new way of saying what an LLC does.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. I'll probably listen to that like twice or thrice again because I really need to know.
Yeah.
Because like I've been on I'm on Twitter since like 2 years now, and DeFi I'm hearing this a lot. Like now I think it's
Right,
almost
right.
like a
So
trend.
yeah, no, basically what's happening there is, say, decentralized finance is basically taking power away from a centralized authority, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
say you're investing in a company, the money is now being handled by a set of people in the company. Now, it can be the board, it can be the management, etc. But what's happening in DeFi is that you have a set of people, say 100 people come together and they
Mm-hmm.
pull in money and they set up a DeFi. Now, everybody gets to vote, everybody gets to make the decisions. Now, everybody has got incentive to make the right decision. Essentially, it's just built on a blockchain, and what happens is when everybody comes together to make a decision, inputs are taken, and those inputs go into a validation engine which says, if 50% or 51% of people have voted for this, then this happens. If not, then this. So that's a smart contract. So what a
Mm.
smart contract is just a digital way of saying, or a yes or no loop where, certain conditions are met, this happens. If not, the other thing happens. So nobody's controlling these decisions. So tomorrow, nobody can alter the outcomes of these decisions, is what I was saying. So in DeFi, I think that's the only abstract way of defining it. Again, there are various physical use cases of this, and there are use cases obviously that have come up. That's why it's a buzzword. But in the larger context, in terms of how this is going to grow and play out in the Indian context and a lot of other contexts around products and businesses, we're yet to see about that. But it's quite cool about how quickly some of these things have grown. Right, I think people are learning about it, and there's still a long way to go. So I'm probably learning as well about it. So I'm not sure if I've explained it in the right sense. If I'll probably go back and read about it as well a little bit.
Interesting. All right, let's just jump back to stock market. So, what are like a few stock market myths that you would like to bust?
Mm, Again, I think I mentioned a few earlier as well. One of the
Huh?
thing is that making money is not easy in stock market. So don't believe anybody who's claiming that you can grow your capital 10x, 15x, or 5x, or whatever it is. I think it's hard work to grow your money in the capital or in the capital market space. So that's one. Other thing is copying somebody who's a huge trader or is a profit making trader will help you make profits as well. I think that's one of the things that's wrong too, because the risk appetite for different people is different, and hence what works for somebody else might not work for you. And the third thing is leverage, right? I think people kind of or at least there's wrong messaging out there which says, if you borrow money and invest in the stock markets, you've got greater chance of winning more money, or at least making more money because you're investing more money that you borrowed. But I think leverage is one of the wrong things that you can do in the stock markets. I think the capital that you invest should be the capital that you're ready to lose, and at least from a very minimal risk taking perspective. I think those are the three things that I can now probably mention at this point in time.
Interesting. All right, let's come back to Rain Matter. Okay, so
Sure. Yeah.
like let's start from the beginning. Like, what is Rain
Yeah.
Matter? What's happening there?
So Rainmatter is it's an investment arm of Zerodha. Basically, in 2016, when we built our Kite application, we Kailash kind of had this vision and foresight to build it using APIs. So basically, what he was thinking was, somebody else trying to do something like this around capital markets should be able to come build on top of us, and that kind of started Rainmatter. And Nitin and Kailash met Small Case team a few days after this conversation about APIs and Kite application, etc. And you see where Small Case is today. And
Mm-hmm.
since that's the journey of Rainmatter, it started with an idea. Now it's an investment arm of Zerodha where we try to support and fund capital markets based startups and founders. We've also ventured into climate now through Rainmatter Foundation. and also we're looking at health and fitness and education as a subject as well. But essentially, what we're trying to do is deepen capital market space in India. So if anybody who's trying to help people manage money better, I think we're more than happy to help them out and look at what are the challenges that we can solve together. But from a Rainmatter perspective as to why it's become a very nice investment arm is because of trust. Right? I think Zerodha has built trust with people over a period of time, and Rainmatter being an arm of Zerodha, I think garners that same trust with startups and founders. And we've been helping a lot of founders and startups over a period of time. So we are a very light touch VC model where we just want to be around cool founders who are trying to do some cool things around capital markets.
Interesting. How different is this from a traditional VC?
So, the time scales for us in terms of decision making is very, very, very short because there is not really a lot of hierarchy in decision making. That's one. The second thing is, very, very light touch in terms of operations. So, very non intrusive. We don't really have a lot of demands of startups. I think the idea is to grow these startups and make sure that they are surviving. And we can probably help in any way possible. But I think in terms of a conventional VC where there's a lot of exit modeling, there's a lot of operational control, there's a lot of conversations going around how strategically you need to plan exits, etc. But for us, I think at Rainmatter, we are very patient capital. Same across Rainmatter Foundation and Rainmatter Climate as well. Is that we're very patient capital, and for us, I think the idea is to invest in startups and make sure that they are delivering value for their clients, and that's the whole idea there. So very different from traditional VC funds.
Like, if I'm not wrong, is this like an incubator type situation where like it would help
It
them to
is,
succeed?
yeah, it is, but it's not really very conventional incubator, right? So when somebody says an incubator and accelerator, I think people think about this official setup where there are a lot of teams who come with applications, apply, and then go through a process. They get allocated seed capital, and then they do a bunch of stuff. So for us, I think it's an incubator from a sense that there's always opportunity to work out problems. There's always opportunity to get advice on legal, regulatory structures, etc. So yeah, obviously, we give office spaces to some of our startups who are trying to work in Bangalore, and all that setup is there. But it's again very different from an incubator because we don't really have a lot of things that a conventional incubator does, which is have certain rights on to the next round, have a few other monetary conditions tied into contracts, etc. So none of that is what we do. We're a very light touch model. Call us as an incubator because essentially there's a lot of help that we give capital market related startups because Nitin sits on a lot of these regulatory committees, and there's always insights and intelligence that, or at least knowledge and ideas that we can share with some of these startups. That kind of helps these startups go a long way.
Interesting. What's happening in the climate side of things?
So in India, it's quite nascent, right? I mean, it's just starting now. I think a lot of investors are looking at climate in India and saying, where are the profit-making avenues available? But obviously, it's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think the planet is warming up faster than ever. I think there's a lot of details out there, and there's a lot of reports out there, a lot of conflicting ideas too. But I think from a climate perspective, India is very well positioned, right? I think there's a lot of work going on in the solar space. There's a lot of work going on in the wind energy space. A lot of work going on in the nuclear energy space. With the EV space as well, I think there's a lot of traction too. And over a period of time, we'll see how this develops. But it's very nascent in India right now. There are a lot of teams and startups working, or at least starting to work on some of these solutions. You should definitely check out some of our portfolio companies at Rainmatter Climate. There as well, I think we are trying to support innovative founders, trying to do some cool things. And again, nothing around business model, nothing around revenue and stuff like that. I think the ideas are more scalable, ideas are more sustainable over a period of time so that they can actually move needles towards certain ambitions. So maybe it can be waste management, can be plastics, can be water, can be all tiny parts of climate puzzle, right? I think people kind of misconstrue climate to be just solutions about carbon, just solutions about reducing carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or greenhouse gases. But it's always also about livelihoods. It's also about making sure people have that empowerment to fight some of these problems themselves, right? So I think that's what we're trying to do at the foundation, is that make sure we look at this from a multi-pronged approach and try to solve it. Again, there's a lot happening in India, and there are a lot of reports and blogs out there, so I'm not going to get into it. But a lot of teams doing a lot of good stuff, and a lot of our teams also, at least at the Rainmatter Foundation, the teams we funded and the teams we've granted money, who are NGOs and peers, are doing a lot of great stuff on the ground.
Interesting. Like, why is there so much conflicting research about global warming? Like, why does that exist? Because when I
It's
was
just
trying to just read
yeah,
about it, like,
yeah,
very this insane. I'm not sure about the word. I think it's like very conflicting. Why does that
correct, correct.
exist?
From my limited research and from whatever I've read so far, it's just lobbying, right? I think there's a huge set of business. There's a lot of businesses out there who are benefiting from
Mm-hmm.
climate intensive practices and processes, right? Oil and gas companies, lot of other, say, climate intensive companies are having a lot of huge carbon footprint, like airlines and transport and whatnot. Now, there's a lot of lobbying from these people to make sure they survive. And I think the whole idea behind a lot of conflicting ideas is that a lot of people trying to put out data and things out there, which is quite opposite to what's happening on the ground. Again, I don't think anybody can refute climate change as a problem, right? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
quite evident with the weather, with whatever we're seeing with climate right now, with seeing with uh, everything around us. I mean, all the kind of patterns that we see is getting hotter and hotter through the year as well. So I think the data is there to support all the evidence that climate change is here, and it's happening now, right? I mean, it's not a future event; it's happening now. We're probably midway through it, and there's only a little bit of time left for us to actually do something about this. Not sure if that'll help, but at least we can try. But yeah, I think the answer to the question around why there's conflicting ideas is just the set of people who are trying to make sure they're relevant, and I think that's the reason. But I'm happy if anybody else knows any other answers that I can probably learn more about. Yeah.
Interesting. So, like, if you have noticed, like, most of the effort that is taken to sort of change the climate, like not talking about companies, like just people,
Right.
is mostly about over sensationalizing the problem that exists. So, do you think that really helps? And how do we actually go about finding solutions to global warming? Like, because it's a
Uh,
very multi-layered problem, right? Like, we can't just be like, let's
yeah,
solve this
it
and like
is.
everything will help. So
Correct.
what's the way to do it? Do you think
Correct.
do you think like even over sensationalize, okay, this word is tough. Over sensationalizing helps, like at least for the problem.
Correct. In terms of messaging, I think I'm not sure. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have any kind of insight into does it help or does it not. But I think what we can do to help global warming as a problem is that we need to educate more and more people, right? And when I say educate more and more people, I mean to say message it in the right way that the people everywhere kind of are aware about what's happening, so that everybody can contribute to this. Obviously, I think there are a lot of ways to do this, and I'm not sure which is the right way. But I think we need to sensitize people to this issue. I think all the people who are educated, all the people who've gone to universities, working in companies, stuff like that, everybody knows about climate change because it would have come up in a conversation somewhere. Somebody would have mentioned it, or they would have read something in a newspaper or in a blog, etc. But there are a lot of people who, are not probably exposed to that environment. And I think it's our duty and our job to make sure that it's communicated to those people so that they can play an effort and they can play a part in this too. But the answer to what can help solve climate change, I think, or global warming, it's going to be all of us, right? I think there's nobody else who's going to come and save us. And I was talking to somebody the other day about the Carl Sagan video where he's talking about Earth from a different vantage point when the Voyager spacecraft kind of turned back and look at Earth, and in the sunbeam, Earth is just a speck, right? And I think that kind of puts everything in perspective. Is that
Mm-hmm.
nobody's coming to save us at this point in time, and as much as we'd like to think there are other planets out there to which humans can migrate to, I think obviously it's not going to happen at any time soon, at least given where we are right now. So it's in our best interest to educate as many people as we possibly can, make sure that we invest a lot of ideas, we invest in a lot of projects that make us climate resilient, at least
Mm-hmm.
try to safeguard some of our interests, and then go from there. But we need to build that foundation, and without having everybody on board, it's very difficult. So I think that's what we're doing at the foundation as well, is that at least at Rainmatter Foundation, we try to speak to people, make sure everybody's sensitive to these ideas and the problem that's out there. That goes a long way too. And again, as you said, it's a multi-pronged problem, not really a silver bullet out there that can solve this. You can't really turn on a switch and solve the problem. But I think if all of us have become responsible over a period of time, I think
Mm-hmm.
the problem can significantly reduce in scale, and it might be treatable at a period.
Interesting. All right. So
Yeah, yeah,
we're almost at the end of the conversation, right? So before
yeah,
like
yeah.
we bid goodbye, I would like see the audience is like 18 to 25. Like, that's the major age group, like for the most part.
Right,
What would
right.
you like
Yeah,
to tell those guys? Like probably like three pieces of advice if I go via the generic route. But like, what would you like to say?
right. I think you gotta whatever you're doing. I think you gotta put your heart and soul into it. That's one thing. I think very important is that there are a lot of times in life where you're probably not doing what you want to do. Maybe you're studying a subject. Maybe you're in university. Maybe you're doing a job that you don't really like. But I think you got to put your heart and soul into whatever you're doing, because you got to do well in that before you take up other responsibilities. So that's one thing, is that whatever you're doing at this point in time, I think you got to do it well, or at least find something else that you can do really well, and go chase that. So that's one. Second thing is, I think always learn interpersonal skills, always talk to people, always look out for new experiences. Kind of helps broaden your perspectives, helps you understand more people, helps you understand more context, help you understand more situations. It'll help you, and it'll take you a long way in life to at least tackle some of the problems that generally come. And the third thing is, keep or at least network, right? I mean, when I say network, I mean to say, do a lot of conscious connecting the dots, where if you're going somewhere or have an ambition, then make sure you're working towards it. I think without that, I think rest of it is quite useless. So got to put in that work every single day, and I think that's something that I tell myself every single day as well. So those are some of the things. Again, I'm not one for advice, because I'm, yeah, quite
Mm-hmm.
young as well. But again, if I have to say the things that has helped me over a period of time, it's been that, is to do whatever you're doing at this point in time, do it really well, and be very mindful of other people, and also network and learn from other people's experience.
Or like, what are the three mistakes you made in the past 5 years which you don't want others to make, like the people listening?
Mm. Yeah. Instinctive decisions. I think that's one.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it very often, from 2014 to 2017, I guess. I've been, erratic decisions just based on instincts and gut feeling. I think I know it works for some people, but for me, it's not really worked out well. So I think just be very patient and very calculative with some of the decisions you make, which have a lot of extended ramifications, right? So that's one. Other mistakes. Hmm. Can't really think of any at this point in time. But
Mm-hmm.
not spending enough time on doing something that you like, right? So there are situations in life where you probably are busy doing a lot of things, and you don't find time to do things that you like. I think that's one of the mistakes that you should never do. Always find time to do things that you like, so that always get a break from doing other things which you probably don't like. So that's one thing. But yeah, I mean, I think each one for himself, right? I think a lot of different ways to tackle problems and go through life. I think the important thing is to be respectful to people, and make sure that you're not being very outlandish with some of the decisions you take. So apart from that, I think everything's going to be great as long as you put work into it.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much for doing this, Dinesh.
Hey, no, thanks again for having me, Asha. Very nice talking to you.
All right,
Cheers.